is we're gonna create the equation first when we're doing proportional equation solving by cross multiplying. Sort of, some of you did it like it's the butterfly, okay? And then sticking an equal sign in the middle. Now here's one thing I want you to do on this side before we start doing anything else. Any place that you see a plus or a minus at all on the whole side, I want you to go ahead and I want you to put parentheses around those. And I'll explain why that's so important in a minute. Because on a lot of the work that we do, those parentheses aren't going to be there. I'm going to depend on you to remember to put them there. And the reason that is when we go to cross multiply, and it doesn't matter which direction you go first. So let's say we decide, okay, we're going to do these two first. Okay, so 10 times 4 is 40. But for the other one, I'm not going to do it quite yet. Because what typically seems to happen if people don't remember the parentheses is they'll just write 5x minus 2 because they'll just multiply the first thing they see. And I can understand that. But by putting the parentheses there, hopefully that's going to be a reminder to us that, oh, I got to multiply that 5 times everything there. And I even mentioned that over here. Distribute on each side if you have parentheses. If you see two terms like x minus 2, put the parentheses around. Okay, we did that. So when I distribute on the right, what's this going to look like once I've actually multiplied the 5 through? $5x. And then what's 5 times negative 2 going to be? Negative 10. Now you're like, okay, now it looks like what we're always doing. Right. The only part's going to be getting it set up originally. Okay, it says get all the x's to one side if they aren't already. Well, they are. Okay. Isolate the x term. Okay. You get that 5x isolated. How do I get the minus 10 out of there? Add it. And then just divide to get my x term alone. And I'm set. So sometimes they'll go really quick. Sometimes it'll be a little bit trickier to work with. Okay? But that's all we're doing on these. So move this down a little bit. Now, I don't see any parentheses in the next one, so this one's going to be a little bit quicker to work with here. So I'll get my equals in. Again, it doesn't matter if you did these two first or these two. I'll get to the same answer at the end. So 5 times 9 is 45. And then 2d times 10, you're like, well, what's up with the d? Just like an x. So 10 times 2 is 20. I just put my variable term with it. But here's the nice thing about this one. No distributing to do. All my variables are on one side. My variable term's isolated. This is great. All I'm going to have to do is step 5 and I'm going to be done. And since I'm multiplying by 20, I'm just going to divide by 20. And I can get decimals on these. So let's see what decimal we get here. Let me get out of there. So in this case, 2.25 is what we end up with. And that's all I can do with that one. So again, sometimes they'll end up short like that. Sometimes, not quite so much. Ooh, the next one, we got 2 sets of parentheses. Okay, so same thing. Let me get my equals. Again, with those parentheses, I'm just going to write what's there first. I'm not going to try and get cute and do all this in one step. And I'm going to do the same thing with my other diagonal. So once I do that, you're like, ooh, this time I got to do distributing on both sides because there's parentheses on both sides. And that's true. So we're actually going to have to do step 2 this time. So if I multiply that through, 8 times 4 is 32. And again, if you need the calculator to do it, no problem with that. 4 times 3 is 12. And again, it's the little things here that can get you. Watch your signs. A positive times a negative is going to give me a negative, and I'm multiplying. Okay, so I don't want like -6 or something like that. But here's where things are a little different than last time. We now have x terms on both sides of the equals. So I can choose to get them to either side I want. Now, my personal preference, I don't like getting negatives with these. So I'm going to take the smaller one and I'm going to move it. Some of you like always getting your x's on the left side, and that's okay too. So whatever I do to one side, we've got to do to both. So let's see here. All my x's are here now. What's my next step going to be? How do I get that minus 8 away from my 4x? Absolutely. And then my last step, as it always seems to be, is just going to be to divide. So we can keep life pretty simple this way. Now there always has to be something that's a little bit odd or strange. So we have the oddball problem. Because you're looking and you're like, okay, 32 times 2 is 64. All right. What's y times y equal? Y squared. Like, oh, haven't done that one before. Now this one, I can't just divide like I normally would. Okay. What we've got to do if we end up with a squared is take the square root of each side. It's because the squared and the square root are opposites, just like add and subtract are, multiply and divide. Square and square root are opposites. And if you're not sure what the square root of 64 is, it is. You can always do the calculator by doing second and x squared. It'll get you the square root button. And then just type the number in. And it is 8. And I can get my answer that way. And again, this note sheet's going to be available for the quizzes and tests, so it's going to be good to have all these examples of things waiting. I want to do a few more of them on the back, though. Just a few. Not going to do them all. But there are a couple more situations that come up back here that I want to make sure we're ready to work with. And one of them is number 1 here. You're like, wait a minute, there's no fraction there. If I don't see something that's a fraction, I'm going to make it a fraction. I'm just going to put it over 1. And once I do that, then I can do what we've been doing on the rest of these. I'm going to cross multiply one way. Okay, maybe like this. Cross multiply the other way. 1 times 51 is 51. No distributing to do this time. That's always nice. No having to get all my x's to one side. No having to isolate. Just got one step left. And I can get to my answer. And that's my big focus with these. Just making sure we kind of get the idea of what's going on. So let's do a couple more just to be safe. We're going to take a look at number 3, number 4 with my parentheses, and then let's try out number 8 here too. And I think we'll have covered everything at least a couple of times each. Okay, so again, whenever I see plus or minus in one of these, I'm going to put the parentheses around just to make sure I'm going good. Put my equals in the middle. And again, it doesn't matter which one I start with, but in the ones that include the parentheses, don't do anything until you get it written down. Nope, it doesn't matter which order that we do them in. We can do them in either order and end up with the same thing.
Really present, was she here?
Yes.
She needs to go over. Bring all your stuff on.
So, when we get here, looks like we got to do some distributing on both sides of the equation. And again, you're multiplying when you distribute. So 6 times 3 is 18. And then we got 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. But just like when we had 2 sets of parentheses the other time, I have a little bit of an issue because I have x's on both sides. So, again, I'm more of a fan of trying to get positive numbers with my x's because the whole negative thing just drives me crazy. So since the 6 is a little bit smaller, and as soon as we're done with this, just in a couple of problems, absolutely. And once I get those x's together, then I can go ahead and isolate it. So I can do the opposite of my minus 20. And I can go ahead and solve that. And those are going to be my longest ones to do. So again, they won't always be this long. Sometimes they're really short. It just depends. And like we mentioned before, when we go to do these, sometimes there are certain steps we may not have to do. Like here, I've only got 1 set of parentheses. I'll multiply my 5 through, so 21 times 5, that's where the 105 is coming from. And again, when I have n's on both sides, I like to move them where it stays positive. But you've got your own way that you could do that if you wanted to. So once I get all those n's to one side, we're isolated except that we have to divide to get my n by itself. And then just to make sure on the goofball ones that come up, like number 8 here, again, if you get those two variables that are the same, this isn't 2y, it's y squared. 25 times 9 is 225. And whenever I get that squared, it's going to be square root. And if you're using the calcs here, it's second and x squared, and that'll get you your square root button. So, whoa, hang on a second here. Let me get out of there. All right, so second and x squared, there's my square root button. 225. Okay, that comes out nice. And we're good to go on that one. So again, keep this handy because it'll help you with some of the different types of problems on the worksheet we're working on. And again, it's also going to be useful when we get to a quiz on this to be able to see how things are going. Now, the sheet that we've got here, this, we're going to keep building in homework check 7 here. Okay, this is going to be our second assignment. Our first one's when we did the test preview on Thursday. And I think there's still a few of those over in the folder if you'd need one, but this is number 2. We'll probably be looking at the end of the week for a homework check, just to make sure and have that ready. But otherwise, we're set on this. Just a suggestion again, though. Go through this review sheet before you ever start. And any place that you see plus or minus with anything, I would go through and put parentheses around those, just so I remember when I'm doing my distributing, oh yeah, I've got to distribute on those and not just multiply to the first part, okay? So we'll get this set.